The fifth pocket held a watch. Inside the right front pocket of almost every pair of jeans in the world, there is a second, much smaller pocket. 2 fingers fit into it. Nothing else does. It was for a pocket watch, and it was there from the beginning. The trousers patented in 1873 had 4 pockets, 2 at the front, 1 at the back, and the small one for the watch. A working man who owned a watch owned one on a chain, and a waistcoat was not something he wore to work. The second back pocket, the one that makes a modern pair 5 pocket, did not arrive until 1901, so the watch pocket is older than the 5th pocket. The little one came first. Pocket watches left ordinary life in the decades after the First World War, when the wristwatch took over. We told that story in the episode about the things you carry. The pocket did not leave with them. It has now spent about a century holding coins, guitar picks, folded notes, and nothing at all. There is a small piece of evidence in the stitching, and you can check it on your own trousers. The watch pocket usually has its own rivets or its own line of reinforcement, out of proportion to anything you would put in it now. It was built to carry a heavy object that swung on a chain. It survives because removing it would cost money. A pattern that has been cut 10 million times is cheaper to keep than to change, and nobody has ever complained about a pocket. The buttons on your sleeve hold nothing. On the outside of the sleeve of a jacket, near the wrist, there are 2, 3, or 4 buttons in a row. On most jackets, they do not open anything. There is no buttonhole under them, or the buttonhole is sewn shut, and the cuff cannot be undone. 2 explanations are repeated everywhere. The first says Napoleon ordered buttons sewn onto the sleeves of his soldiers, coats to stop them wiping their noses on the cloth. The second says the buttons come from surgeons who needed to turn the cuff back to work, and so the buttons on a good jacket really do open, and the feature is called a surgeon's cuff. Neither has a contemporary document behind it. Both first appear in print long after the period they describe, and both are the kind of story that is satisfying enough to survive without evidence. What can be traced is duller. As the tailored coat took its modern shape in the 1800s, the sleeve ended in a small opening that could be closed, and buttons closed it. Then the sleeve stopped being closed at all, and the buttons stayed. Today they carry a meaning that has nothing to do with wrists. On a factory-made jacket, they are decorative. On a jacket made to measure, they usually work, and the fact that they work is treated as a quiet sign of how the jacket was made. Some men leave the last one undone to show it. That is a leftover doing a second job it was never given. The buttons closed a cuff, then stopped closing it, and are now evidence about the tailor. The hole in your lapel is a collar that closed. On the left side of a jacket, at the top of the lapel, there is a buttonhole. It is sewn properly, with the same stitching as a working buttonhole, and there is usually no button anywhere near it. The explanation is in the shape of the lapel itself. A lapel is a fold. Unfold it, and you have a coat front that closes all the way up to the throat, with a collar that stands rather than lies. That is how outdoor coats were made when weather was the main thing a coat dealt with. The buttonhole at the top of the lapel is the last hole in that row, and the button it took is often still there on the opposite side, hidden underneath. When the coat began to be worn open, the top of it folded back into the shape we now call a lapel, and the hole rolled over to the outside, where it became visible and useless at the same moment. Once it was visible, it was used. A flower put through it is called a boutonnière, which is simply the French word for buttonhole. In some countries, a small badge or ribbon goes through it. On many jackets, there is a little loop of thread on the back of the lapel behind the hole, put there to hold the stem of the flower, which means tailors are still building support for a use that came second. So the sequence runs: a hole that closed a coat against wind, then a hole that holds a flower, then a hole that holds nothing and is sewn anyway because a lapel without one looks unfinished.